Hello, everybody. My name is Pablo Boczkowski. I'm a faculty member at Northwestern University and the director of the Center for Latinx Digital Media. Thank you so much for joining us for today's weekly virtual seminar of the Center. It is really a pleasure to have you with us today. The mission of the Center is to create knowledge about digital media in Latinx communities across the Americas. And today's speaker is a leading scholar and administrator in this space. Angharad Valdivia is Research Professor of Communications and Media at the Institute of Communication Research and the Department of Media and Cinema Studies, both at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Celeste Wagner, doctoral candidate at the Annenberg School of Communication at the University of Pennsylvania and an affiliate at the Center for Latinx Digital Media, will properly introduce Angharad in just a minute. But before we do that, I'd like to start by acknowledging that Northwestern is a community of learners situated within a network of historical and contemporary relationships with Native American tribes, communities, parents, students, and alumni. It is also in close proximity to an urban Native American community in Chicago and near several tribes in the Midwest. The Northwestern campus sits on the traditional homelands of the people of the Council of the Three Fires, the Ojibwe, the Potawatomi, and the Ottawa, as well as the Menominee, Miami, and Ho-Chunk nations. It was also a site of trade, travel, gathering, and healing for more than a dozen other native tribes, and it is still home to over 100,000 tribal members in the state of Illinois. It is within Northwestern's responsibility as an academic institution to disseminate knowledge about Native peoples and the institution's history with them. Consistent with the university's commitment to diversity and inclusion, Northwestern works towards building relationships with Native American communities through academic pursuits, partnerships, historical recognitions, community service, and enrollment efforts. Let me say briefly how the seminar will unfold. First, Celeste will tell us more about Angharad's research and career in just a minute. Then Angharad will deliver her seminar, and after that, we will open for questions. Please enter your questions in the Q&A function of the webinar throughout the conversation. Celeste and I will moderate. At the end, we will deliver closing remarks. Once again, many thanks for joining us, and without further ado, Celeste, the screen is all yours.
Hi, everyone. I'm incredibly honored to have been invited to introduce Professor Angharad Valdivia today and to moderate this fantastic talk with Pablo later. Dr. Valdivia is Research Professor of Communications and Media Studies at the Department of Media and Cinema Studies at the Institute of Communications Research at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. She was the inaugural head of the Media and Cinema Studies Department and is also former interim director of the Institute of Communications Research at the University of Illinois. With a transnational focus, her research centers at the intersection of gender and ethnicity in popular culture, particularly in relation to media and feminist studies and Latina, Latino, and Latin American studies. She has been a visiting scholar at different universities across the world, such as in Colombia, Chile, the UK, Canada, and Spain, and has conducted original field research in various countries, such as Nicaragua, Peru, and Chile. Professor Valdivia has recently published The Gender of Latinidad, Uses and Abuses of Hybridity, and is the author of several other books, such as A Latina in the Land of Hollywood and Feminism, Multiculturalism, and the Media. This year, Professor Valdivia has been recognized for her distinguished scholarship with one of the highest honors in communication studies by being elected as an ICA Fellow. Please join me in welcoming Professor Valdivia.
Thank you, Celeste. Good. I will now share my PowerPoint. Thank you for being with us today. This background has a really sunny kind of sky, and that is actually what campus looks like today, I'm told, but that's what my house looks like today. So let me make sure that I'm sharing with you everything, and I will go straight to my PowerPoint. Okay, here we go. Can you all see my PowerPoint and hear me? Just if I can get a sense that you are. Yes? Okay, I'm going to go on unless I'm told otherwise. So my title of my talk is Disney, Gender, Generation, and Latinidad, stuck in the middle as a metaphor for the ambivalent and ambiguous location of the U.S. most numerous minority. I thank you all for attending this lecture. I thank Professor Pablo Kowalski for inviting me to join in this inaugural Center for Latinx Digital Media Lecture Series. I am honored to present after my esteemed colleagues, Jessica Redis and Hector Amaya, and I thank Maura Motasi and Celeste Wagner for facilitating this Zoom event. And I look very much forward to a day when I can once more take a child to a Disney theme park. On January, let me minimize this. On January 26, 2020, hours after the nation learned that Kobe Bryant and his daughter Gianna had perished in a helicopter crash near Calabasas, California, the Grammy Awards were held in the Staples Center in Los Angeles, where the Lakers play their home games. Or as Alicia Keys said, the hostess of that night's Grammys put it, the house that Kobe built. As Gramsci theorized, the terrain of popular culture is a site of popular struggle, and award shows are intensely political events. Who gets to vote? What are the categories? Who performs? Who sponsors? Acceptance speeches, both their content and their length, etc., are all potential minefields of challenges and controversies. In the US, the struggle over what counts as popular in popular music includes the inclusion or exclusion of ethnic groups and our/their music. So it was that on this Grammy Award night, Demi Lovato, one of the live Disney princesses that I discuss in this talk today, made her first public appearance after her last overdose on July 24, 2018. The lyrics to Anyone, which she wrote shortly before her overdose, include the following refrain. 100 million stories and 100 million songs. I feel stupid when I sing. Nobody's listening to me. Nobody's listening. I talk to shooting stars, but they always get it wrong. I feel stupid when I pray. So why am I praying anyway if nobody's listening? This is not a happy song. It is a cry for help and a testament to survival. It is a display of what Dobson and Kanay call ugly feelings, the affective dissonance with the upbeat psychic life of post-feminism, and where girls, tweens, and women are supposed to perform a can-do-ness as they try to survive in a post-recessional world. The song is, I suggest, indicative of the labor and agency that Latinas must render via Disney to audiences as they seek to be popular in a career that is anything but linear and guaranteed. Notice I do not use the word resilience, which I defined as a word the oppressors used to make the oppressed keep going. In this presentation, I explore Disney's purposeful and continuous construction of a flexible Latinidad, drawing on Diana Leon Boy's amazing research. Disney's flexible Latinidad stems from targeting tweens, a strategy dating back to Lizzie McGuire in 2002. Kennedy, 2018, locates the figure of the tween, the pre-adolescent girl, as a gendered, age-defined subject in the process of transformative becoming. That is, according to these narratives, the tween is defined by her transitional status between girlhood and young womanhood. She must successfully develop an identity, a process of finding herself, requiring the girl, both the on-screen and the assumed subject addressed by these films, to become appropriately feminine and reveal and maintain an authenticity. The tween is thus positioned as the ideal subject of neoliberalism. So this presentation draws on these isms that are being circulated both in popular culture, but also theorized within our field and many other fields, post-feminism, neoliberalism, and the rhetoric of post-racism. Thus, this presentation sits also at the intersection between girl studies, Disney studies, Latina, Latino studies, and media studies. I connect for you princesses and princess culture, a multi-billion-dollar property for Disney, tween fictional characters, and tween starlets. So all of these, princess culture, tween fictional characters, and tween starlets, function as part of princess culture, and real live actresses groomed through the Disney farm system to be launched more broadly as they go through tweenhood, teenhood, and into early adulthood. These three categories within princess culture contribute to Disney's production of contemporary, ambiguous, and hybrid representations, which generate a cycle of avowal and disavowal of Latinidad, resulting in what I term an unambivalent structure of ambivalence. My presentation explores Disney's construction of ambiguous and hybrid Latinidad from girlhood into tweendom and the promised land of long-lasting adult stardom, a process in which audiences and actors are laborers. Here I draw on Dallas Mythe. Chavez and Kylie further break out the labor that children perform in the Disney universe as audiences, actors, and corporate social responsibility recipients and managed workers. Everybody's working here. Nothing happens without human labor. Combining girl studies with post-feminism reveals that can-do authenticity in the tween universe can only be achieved through post-feminist practices of individualism, working on the self, and self-surveillance. Girls are numerous. Girls consume. Girls are creative. Girls assert agency. Girls are not autonomous in that they're represented by social structures, guardians, schools, science, etc. Disney targets the girl audience frontally and unambiguously through their Princess franchise and other tween products. Disney is a major transnational conglomerate. Its tentacles reach far and wide, evidenced by the 2020 Super Bowl wrapped up with a cross-promotion between the Make-A-Wish Foundation and Disney Mickey and Minnie. Global expansion dates back to the 40s as Disney proceeded in a global, synergistic, and convergent strategic plan long before these became buzzwords in the 1980s version of globalization. Indeed, one could argue that if not actually inventing them, Disney has been at the forefront of culturally and economically deploying these concepts. Yet venturing into the turbulent waters of production and inclusion of Latinidad has proven to be a challenging task for the House of Mouse. Here I just have a couple of, Disney in our everyday lives slides. I have what about Disney? Disney will sue you if you use any of their cultural property without retribution, without paying them, without licensing. So here I have an example from the Washington Post where a high school played The Lion King at a fundraiser. Disney found out about it and fined it because they did not have the rights. Talking about this Disney presentation, one of my colleagues says to me, I'm glad I'm not old enough to have to watch Disney again. Well, he's totally wrong because Disney targets you across the lifespan. And when his grandchildren are born, he's going to be right back in Disney and I'm going to go make fun of him. Signed up for Disney Stream. This is me last, when was it that Disney came on? Was it sometime this summer? I had all of my children home because of the COVID. As soon as Disney live stream came on, I turned it on. Obviously, I have to do it for research purposes. I came back to that room, the TV room, 8 hours later, and they were all still sitting. They had watched Parent Trap 2, Moana, Lizzie McGuire movie, and were deep into Star Wars. So this is my own family. And here I have a picture of cross-generational Disney pedagogy. I figure that with the generation of my grandchildren, I'm going to make sure they watch Lizzie McGuire. Here, one of my grandsons was originally playing with Legos, but once I put Lizzie McGuire on, he was hooked. He loves it. I do too. I explore the tension between presence and visibility, agency and structure, and labor and representation in relation of my expansion of the broad category of Disney princesses. I draw on decades of Latino media studies whose findings document that mainstream visibility of Latinidad seldom goes behind the impulse or beyond the impulse to flatten difference. The flattening of difference results from a range of nationalities and ethnicities being compared to one nation rather than examined in relation to each other in more or less polyvalent terms. The flattening is multiple in that there is a flattening of all that is Latina, Latino, in the US into one undifferentiated other, and that the US is lumped with the Latin American and the Iberian Peninsula. So we get J-Lo, Shakira, and Rosalia all lumped into the same category, Latin music, and covered as Latinas. Moreover, as Francis Aparicio notes, the two main discursive strategies for representing Latinas are the Mexican and the tropical. And these largely serve to lump and differentiate categories of Latinas, Latinos, drawing largely on an old binary of traditional and modern. Traditional, modern. Drawing back to those of you who have done international communications classes or research, to Daniel Lerner. The market-driven inclusion of the other through tokenistic visibility represents a capitalist impulse toward utopian inclusivity in representation, casting, and production that potentially generates a dystopian response from those being represented. This dynamic, in turn, contributes to an ambivalent strategy of diversity that comes off as avowal and disavowal of the ethnic group, a narrative that Disney gingerly dares to represent in an effort to interpolate expanded audiences and therefore generate profit without alienating its normative audience, read white, middle class, Eurocentric. Arguably, inclusion of previously ignored groups such as brown girls has the potential to create spaces for historically under-recognized groups to be represented and to recognize themselves. This remains a continuity in the history of media technologies and practices. The potential is democratic, liberatory, inclusive, and also authoritarian, regulatory, surveilling, and exclusionary. Unsurprisingly, Disney's efforts to domesticate and include diversity yield contradictory results. The uses and abuses of ambiguous Latinidad proved to be quite profitable while simultaneously engaging the imaginations of girls, increasing visibility of Latinas and Latinos, and potentially generating a complex and internally contradictory cycle of self-esteem, agency, and marginalization. The fact is, Disney did not claim to produce Latino shows and movies until recently, given that Latinidad, as defined within contemporary politics and Latino studies, is a nation-specific category. Yet Disney historically and purposefully courted the Latin American audience and by implication, the US Latino audience. Here I have three main tropes of Latinidad in mainstream US popular culture. Dia de los Muertos, you have Coco, quinceañeras, and you have here Disney advertises quince packages. So if you want to have your quinceañera in Disney, call Disney, they'll work with you. And of course, Navidad, and here I have you dating back all the way to the Three Caballeros of 1945. So these are the major tropes that Latinos are put in when they are in any kind of popular culture visibility, and that includes, of course, within Disney. Given that the United States and abroad, given that in the United States and abroad, Disney faces a population that bears out complicated flows and hybridities due to historical, voluntary, and forced mobility, as well as unleashed by the forces of this latest neoliberal wave of globalization, the company pursues a simultaneous tactic of continuing to produce highly stereotypical representations of other cultures, including the engagement with the flattening of difference, and produce newly ambiguous representations that nod to diversity in subtle, nearly imperceptible ways. Let's dive into Disney princesses, for they go way back. The Disney princess concept debuted in 1937 via Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and was recast into an official Disney princess franchise in 2000, so as to capitalize on synergistic marketing of new and previous princesses via movies, television, toys, digital gaming, and rides, and live princesses at the theme parks. For example, Diana Leon Boyce has conducted brilliant research in the theme parks themselves to see how Elena of Avalor is situated in both Disneyland in California and Disney World in Florida. And there are really significant differences. Sensitive to criticism that all the feature film animated princesses were white, Disney began to mix it up with Mulan, Aladdin, and Pocahontas. Tiana and the Frog in 2000 marked the first time Disney created an African-American princess. Just showed this in one of my classes, and many of my African-American students still complaining about the fact that finally the movie that had an African-American princess, most of the time during the movie, she actually is a frog. By now, we have ethnic princesses in specific and fantasy lands. We have spunky princesses. We have princesses that do not end up married to a prince, etc. Contemporary post-feminist Disney princesses are coded through individualism, beauty, and performance as part of the narrative iconography. Spunky or can-do heroines abound in post-feminist popular culture, so their appearance in Disney is part of this cultural moment when beautiful in relation to whiteness, young women use their own feminine subjectivity to forge ahead. While some of the princesses may be spunky and some of them may end up single, all of them are beautiful, have huge almond eyes, have tiny waists, and possess a mane of hair whose size rivals that of the princess whose head it's on. Kind of like J-Lo at the Super Bowl. Here, I just have this part here because a lot of times Disney says, oh, you know, we're just in a fantasy land. We're not, you know, we don't mean to be specific, but when they want to, they have all of this archive of icons to draw on. And here in Mater's Tall Tales, the Matador draws on all of the stereotypical, you know, elements of Spanishness, the matador, the bullfighter and all the elements of the bullfighter, the kind of decorations that the bullfighting outfit would have, the señorita swooning, the kind of the peineta, everything is there. So Disney draws on things, you know, as they choose, and then they say we're never specific, but they do sometimes aim for specificity and sometimes they do not. When Disney produces ambiguity, it is far subtler and perhaps more powerful, insidious, and influential. They intend to produce ambiguity, the uncoding of it, aims for a multiplicitous decoding. It cannot be said that Disney uncodes ambiguity without intent or purpose. Media industries have the profit motive as their main purpose and function in myriad ways to maximize profit. At the micro level of everyday production of mediated material, the tiniest of elements are researched, rehearsed, staged, and edited to achieve a seamless and slick media product that hopefully resonates with ever-changing and increasing audiences with the intent to grow audience reach. So to say that the ambiguity is accidental is highly unlikely, as every little element of media production is planned and edited. Second, media industries in general and Disney in particular have long history of creating unambiguous ethnic characters and statements. So here's unambiguous. Ethnicizing tween dreams. I'm trying to just see how I'm doing here in time. Okay. Chronologically, Disney introduced ambiguous Latinidad through subtle sidekick Latinas in television franchises, real-life Latina talent from the Disney farm system, and animated princesses who are not yet in the official Disney princess pantheon. So neither of the Latina princesses are part of the princess franchise. Thus, following a sheet from the playbook of liberal feminism and its popular culture backlash, post-feminism, Disney's first ambiguous Latina, Miranda Sanchez, shows up in 2001 as a sidekick in the global tween juggernaut, Lizzie McGuire. The second major Disney Latina, Gabriella Montez, comes slightly later in 2006 in High School Musical. Her role borders between main character and sidekick and is much more subtly Latina than Miranda in Lizzie. As such, Miranda and Gabriella represent the new face of diversity in Disney Channel, the ambiguously ethnic, post-feminist Latina. These two juggernaut hits greatly contributed to Disney's coffers in the first decade of the 2000s, and both of them relied on tween representations to target tween audiences and ambiguous Latinas to round out a universe of light-skinned inclusivity. These two Latinas are subtle and ambiguous enough as to be literally unperceived by many members of the audience as Latinas. Miranda Sanchez, played by Lalaine Vergara Paras, a trendy and loyal best friend, hung out with Gordo and Lizzie in the eponymous tween series Lizzie McGuire, though she is written out of the last 6 episodes of the series and of the Lizzie McGuire movie. Gabriella Montez, played by Vanessa Hudgens, a nerdy but cute high schooler, paired up with high school popular kid, heartthrob, and basketball star Troy to form the lead couple of the amazingly popular made-for-television movie franchise High School Musical. Although within slightly different vehicles, a regular television series for Miranda and a television movie franchise with a Hollywood film for Gabriella, both of these characters were part of unexpectedly successful Disney properties whose target audience, the female tween, drove their success and profits. So I'm talking about both the girls on the screen and the fact that tween girls are consuming these girls. When I say unexpectedly popular, I speak, for example, to the fact that High School Musical, the first one, cost $4 million to make and generated over $1 billion in profit. That is what I call a capitalist success. Let me kind of, the first year of the series of Lizzie McGuire has very few elements other than the Day of the Dead episode, called The Day of the Night of the Dead. Within mainstream Latino, I've already mentioned this is one of the usual tropes. In Lizzie, family is nearly absent from Miranda's plotline. Miranda's mom appears in a total of 4 episodes, as does her dad, though her mom has more lines. Miranda's parents debut in the most Latina episode, Night of the Day of the Dead, and which is treated here as a theme for Lizzie's high school Halloween party. Miranda offers to bring skeletons for the Halloween Day of the Dead celebration and warns their nemesis, Kate, that they represent ancestors. Mr. and Mrs. Sanchez, Miranda's parents, cooperate with an elaborate ruse to pay Kate back for displacing Lizzie, who wanted to dress up as Elvira. Mr. Sanchez declares this to be one of his favorite holidays, and Mrs. Sanchez actually says in Spanish, El Día de los Muertos. After this episode, Miranda's parents appear sporadically and briefly in the show. Like Miranda, Gabriella Montez debuts in the opening scene of the wildly successful High School Musical trilogy in 2006, while Miranda's sidekick, Gabriella, is one half of the main couple. Gabriella's Latinidad is subtler and more ambiguous than Miranda. Now remember, Miranda's Latinidad is pretty subtle, so Gabriella is even subtler, okay? The opening scene of the first movie finds Troy and Gabriella in a New Year's Eve party in an upscale ski lodge. Troy's character as a popular jock is established, as is Gabriella's role as a studious but pretty nerd. Gabriella and Troy realize they like each other, and much like the plot in Grease, this vacation encounter becomes a precursor of a relationship when both unexpectedly end up at the same high school in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Gabriella represents an unusual Latina from mainstream popular culture. She's an upper middle-class science nerd, although there's more writing now that shows that this is a kind of a new subtle trope. Nothing much other than her name, Gabriella Montez, signals to her Latinidad. In fact, the fact that Gabriella has 2 L's in her first name further muddles her Latinidad and implies an Italianness. Gabriella's hair is long, dark, and wavy. Her skin is ever so slightly olive color. Her skin is darker than Sharpay's, a classic white, rich, and blonde beauty who plays the scheming drama kid. And her skin is lighter than Taylor's, the light African-American girl who runs up the 3 females in the main group of characters. Thus, Gabriella occupies an in-between ethnic location in relation to ultra-white Sharpay and light African-American Taylor. Everything from Gabriella's skin tone to everyday clothing styles in between, and slightly conservative. It's entirely possible for Gabriella's Latinidad to pass wholly unperceived in High School Musical. The relational skin color, wardrobe, and hairstyle elements are very subtle. Mrs. Montez is a little bit more Latina, but really slight. She never almost shows up. Missing are the stereotypical components of mainstream stereotypical Latinidad, such as accented English in the parents' generation, markers of Catholicism, either through jewelry and or religious icons, stereotypical celebrations such as quinceañeras or Dia de los Muertos, presence of Latin music in any form, hoop earrings, red lipstick, and some. The franchise contains neither the signifiers of the abnegated Catholic nor the Spitfire Latina. The Latinidad is so subtle that many members of the audience miss it altogether or realize its presence only after reading an academic article, such as my friend and colleague, Sharon Mazzarella, who wrote to me years after High School Musical and said to me, "You never told me Gabriella was Latina." Okay. Fun fact, both of these media properties were about to be rebooted. High School Musical did reboot, though not with the original cast. And Lizzie McGuire, after filming 2 episodes, went into hiatus, which makes fans very mad. You can read about that in social media. I now move on to Selena and Demi. Selena and Demi Lovato, Selena Gomez and Demi Lovato continue to bear Disney's gingerly approach to Latinidad. Selena Gomez was born in Texas in 1992 to a Mexican-American father and a Caucasian mother with some Italian ancestry, and was named after Selena Quintanilla, the Tejana star who was killed in 1995. Similarly, Demetria Divon Lovato was born in 1992 in New Mexico of a Mexican-American father and a Caucasian mother, whose ethnic mix includes Irish and Italian roots. Both girls grew up in Texas, bear light phenotypic characteristics, including light skin and long brown hair, which they have invariably dyed and styled in different lengths throughout their career. Their stage names of Selena and Demi could signal Latinidad to those alerted to it, or could be read as much more generic names. In 2002, both Selena and Demi were selected to be part of a multicultural cast of the children's television mega hit Barney and Friends, and began their ascent as performers and celebrities. In case you do not know, this is Demi, and this is Selena. Okay. By 2006, the same year as the debut of High School Musical, Selena Gomez begins to appear in Disney's children's television, and Demi Lovato transitions into Disney television in 2007. Their initial roles as ambiguous ethnics and or white girls serve as launching pads for their starring roles as ambiguous Latinas in their respective Disney media vehicles. The television show Wizards of Waverly Place for Selena, and the made-for-television movie franchise Camp Rock, and the short-lived television series Sunny with a Chance for Demi. Their title roles further underscore Disney's tenuous and ambiguous approach to Latinidad. Selena Gomez's character in Wizards is hybrid with a Disney twist. Alexandra, Margarita, Alex, Russo is a combination of Latina through her mother, Italian-American, and wizard through her father. As with the previously analyzed Gabriella and Miranda, Alex's name is not identifiable Latina. Indeed, it is a gender-neutral name, which befits the highly tomboyish character. Alexandra is not spelled in Spanish, otherwise it would have a J and be Alejandra. Margarita is more Latina of a name, but it almost never comes up in the series, so that the main character of the show, Selena, is most often referred to as Alex. Neither of Alex's brothers, Justin and Max, have particularly Latino names. Their mother, like Alexandra and Gabriella, is named Teresa, a potentially Latina name with an extra H to dilute its Latinidad. Played by Maria Canals Farrera, Teresa and her mother, Alex's grandmother, Magdalena, played by Belita Morenos of George Lopez fame, are just about the only Latina characters and actors within the entire series. As has become a staple of Latina representation, the Wizard's most Latina episode is Quinceañera. But other than some uses of the word quinceañera pronounced in Spanish, there are a few other elements of Latinidad in this episode. Although the maternal grandmother shows up for the occasion, her unorthodox personality is more tomboyish like Alex than traditionally grandmotherly. A multicultural cast of silent partygoers serves as a background props. And other than Teresa, Alex's mother, insisting on the party, and eventually through a Freaky Friday-like body switch, becoming the protagonist of the party. So for here you have this is actually her mother is in the body of Selena, and this is Selena in the body of her mother, and that's the postures. Okay, other than and just saying Latinidad, there's really not that much Latinidad in the party. And Alex's little brother Max bears the burden of articulating stereotypes of Latinidad with 2 consecutive line theaters when forced to take ballroom dancing lessons in preparation for the big party. Quote, salsa, were we supposed to bring chips? End quote. And, quote, it is not just a zesty dip, end quote. So that's what the little brother says about salsa. Following her role as the bell rings, Demi Lovato's breakthrough role came through the made-for-television Disney Channel movie Camp Rock. Drawing on the huge success of High School Musical and Paramount's School of Rock, Camp Rock presents us with tweens in a summer camp for performers. Demi plays the lead character of Michi Torres, and Maria Canals Farrera again plays her mother, Connie Torres. Whereas in Wizards, Canals Farrera has no accent, she has a slight accent in Camp Rock. Michi cannot afford the camp tuition, so her mom caters food, and Michi works at the dining hall to pay her fees. Dad owns a hardware store. The working class element of Latinidad, a common element of contemporary mainstream discursive construction, is unusual in a Disney universe populated by implicitly upper middle class and or magical characters. Michi's nemesis, Tess, is a predictably white, rich, and blonde girl. The rest of the popular girl group is composed of a light African American and an Asian American girl, a classic multicultural group within the Disney universe that locates the Latina in the middle. Through the Taurus name, her family's uniformly brown hair, and her ethnic in-between relationality with the other girls, and her working class family, Michi exhibits a light Latinidad. The movie is yet another iteration of the Cinderella narrative for Michi. The poor working girl ends up with a popular boy / prince played by one of the Jonas brothers. While popular, this movie was not as popular as High School Musical. Lovato signed a recording contract with Hollywood Records, also a subsidiary of Disney, and was cast in the leading role in Sunny with a Chance, which lasted 2 seasons. Having these 2 live tween princesses proved to be an irresistible opportunity for a composite vehicle, Princess Protection Program, 2009. As part of the publicity process that accompanied PPP, Selena and Demi appeared on the cover of People magazine on July 22, 2009 as best friends forever, whose friendship dated back to Barney. The movie commodified the girls' supposed best friend status, and making-of videos foregrounded this BFF narrative. Created so as to draw on the synergies available through Disney Channel, audiences were incentivized to watch PPP through access to never-before-seen episodes of Wizards and Sonic, thus synergistically linking audiences back to individual Selena and Demi vehicles. The PPP soundtrack included the single One and the Same, performed by both Selena and Demi, whose music video was included in the DVD of the movie, and the song was included in that year's Disney's Classic playlist. Marketed globally, PPP movie posters abounded throughout cities such as Santiago, Chile, Buenos Aires, Argentina, and Madrid, Spain, where it was billed as part of Disney's television Este Verano con Disney Channel, this summer with Disney Channel, which rhymes in Spanish. Here I have the cover of my latest book, which Pablo should recognize maybe. This is a picture of the entrance to a subte, which is the subway station in downtown Buenos Aires. And a little fun fact, it was very hard to get anything on the cover from my picture archive because the publishers were afraid they were going to get sued by Disney. So for some reason, this picture of this entrance to the subway station in Buenos Aires passed, you know, the intellectual property police at the publishers, and that's the cover to my book. Movie posters were generally distributed in places like metro stations and bus stops throughout the cities, in addition to billboards. In Latin America, Disney Channel bundled the tween programming, Wizards, Hannah Montana, and later Sunny, with the promotional message, Chicas con actitud, girls with an attitude. The stereotypical representation of Latin America in Princess Protection Program serves as a backdrop for the foregrounding and bringing together in one movie of two ambiguous Latinas who were marketed within the US and also globally, especially in Spain and Latin America, through the light Latin looks so preferred by mainstream media, simultaneously providing publicity for wizards and camp rock, and launching these real-life princesses through ambiguous representation beyond their first movie, Disney movie together. I'm kind of cutting a little bit, getting ahead here because I have too much and I'm running out of time, but the girls are somatically similar so as to serve the narrative device of them being temporarily mistaken for each other. This is a favorite Disney move. Here we have a photograph of Parent Trap 2 with Lindsay Lohan, who I'm always rooting for. And here we have a princess movie with Vanessa Hudgens, where she also plays a double and with two different kind of suitors. And they switch places as well. I'm just not going to talk that much more about PPP, although it uses this ambiguous location, very much like Elena of Avalor and many Disney movies and non-Disney movies, including Dora the Explorer, where you find yourself in this island trope setting. Okay. According to templated Disney career trajectory, from their Disney's television show, Selena and Demi methodically fanned out into contemporary celebrity branding efforts in old school Disney star style, and eventually moved through and beyond Disney to enter into more grown-up and sexualized endeavors, which are usually offered to teens as they transition into adulthood. The synergistic groundwork laid by Michael Eisner in Disney's expansionary years of 1984 to 2005 included the global deployment of Disney's children's television via Tweens, via Lizzie McGuire. Demi Lovato and Selena Gomez take this path from tween television to tween musical performer, enabled by the creation of two synergistic Walt Disney Company properties. In other words, Selena and Demi debut in Barney, began to appear in small and growing roles in Disney, and then are launched via Hollywood Records into fashion and philanthropy or agential citizenships as part of a carefully orchestrated and managed branding approach. Fitting with the ambiguity, according to them, in the Disney universe, Gomez and Lovato have pursued a path that backgrounds their mixed and ambiguous Latinidad while foregrounding their girl next door, can-do girl appeal, and simultaneously performing neoliberal, post-feminist, and colorblind exemplary citizenship. I'm going to skip over the fact that they've both had several physical and mental health issues, including Selena Gomez getting a kidney transplant from her best friend. And this being neoliberalism, Selena commodified that kidney transplant, and her best friend commodified her relationship with Selena in the kidney transplant. And indeed, her best friend kind of pulled Selena into Latinidad more so than Selena had ever done by using Spanish words such as hermanas in her relationship with Selena, okay? And Demi Lovato has had much, much more severe issues of substance abuse, mental health, and eating disorder issues. And this appearance in the Super Bowl was her returning to health as she has battled all of these demons as a former Disney princess trying to make her way as an adult. Okay. I will now go on to the stuck in the middle part that's in the title, and I will stop talking quite soon, I promise. Diana Leon Boyce and I co-authored in the Journal of Communication and Media an article about stuck in the middle, which serves as a metaphor for the location of Latinidad within contemporary popular culture. Latinidad is stuck in the middle between whiteness and blackness and serves as that bridge, which is the authorized and kind of inclusivity in much of mainstream popular media. And thus also serves to push blackness out of the picture one more time. And it is a very light, it is a very ambiguous, it is a very subtle Latinidad. So we we have much more on that on this article in the Journal of Communication and Media, but Jenna Ortega is literally stuck in the middle of this numerous family where everybody's somatically light-skinned and brown-haired. And the only elements of Latinidad seem to be the large family size. And of course, celebration of quinceañera, not once, but twice within the showing. Indeed, the very last episode of the show in the series was a quinceañera, okay? And they had a very long, painfully long, I would say, special episode on Navidad, which was not very religious, but it was about family getting together. Then I just have this slide about Sofia Carson, who seems to be ambiguous Latina in the making. She is being recruited and put into smaller and ever increasing bigger roles. And she's appeared in a couple of Cinderella movies in Disney Channel. So we'll see what happens in her future. Okay. I also have a lot more in the book and many other places about the animated Latinas, Sofia the First, which Disney originally said, yeah, this is our first Latina. And then they're like, no, JK, she's really not Latina. She's a fantasy princess. Disney does not do specificity. This is a fantasy, maybe loosely based on Scandinavia and Spain. We don't know, but this is not our first Latina. So they backtracked after that. And then out of her amulet, they created Elena of Avalor, which within the show, she's always called Elena. So her name is pronounced anglicized. And with Elena of Avalor, they actually avow Latinidad, although when you do an analysis of Elena of Avalor, she's really not Latina, she's Latin America. And in fact, we just studied her in one of my classes the other day, and we decided she's just a hot mess of Latin Americanness because she's got signifiers from Spain, flamenco, she's got the hoops, she's got Brazilian dress, she's got Chilean myths, she's got Peruvian whatever. So she is really a flattening of difference. Everything is thrown in there. And of course, she is in that indeterminate island. However, Amy Carrero, who plays her, has said that she is so proud to be playing the first Latina princess in Disney, and that dating back to her grandmother, theirs has been an imaginary world that has been influenced by Disney. So I'm going to go now to the conclusion because I don't want to talk that, I want to have some space for questions. Given that Latinas and Latinos are an in-between ethnic category and tweens an in-between age category, this presentation highlighted ambiguity as in-betweenist 3.0. The in-between or bridge role that Latinas play in popular culture translates into Disney Latinas being both can-do girls and at risk, especially as in the real life experience, as they represent characters, navigate as actors, and are interpreted by girls. We're all working here for Disney, most of us without pay, though we are paying to work. Furthermore, building on Shields, Dobson, and Kane, the lives of starlets appear to express affective dissonance that bubbles over into mental and physical health issues, a decidedly dystopian outcome. The can-do Disney's princess utopia embodied by the animated princesses and the tween fictional characters cannot be sustained by the live actresses in the flesh. Theirs is a game of resistance and survival. We're not just consuming the entertainment and related celebrity media and products. We are consuming actual human beings, some of whom might not make it. And we remain, as Latinas, stuck in the middle, in that middle ground between whiteness and blackness that serves to displace blackness once more and to secure whiteness as normative. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was a fabulous presentation. I have so many questions that I want to ask, but Celeste, while we wait for questions from the audience, would you like to take a first step at asking a question or two?
Yes, thank you, Professor Valdivia. This was a fantastic talk. I grew up with some of these representations, not quite all of them, but it's familiar to me too in that sense. So I wanted to ask you a twofold question to begin with. So naturally, as you're describing, these constructions of ambiguous Latinidad do not really represent any national Latinidad, if that is even possible. But this is like mainstream global popular culture. So I was wondering if you have any comments on maybe Disney's strategies in terms of profit making models and strategies, in how much, or if in any way they tailor some of these constructions of Latinidad to Latin American audiences in Latin America, because these are shows and movies and content that they are very much watched in Latin America. So maybe, are there any tailoring strategies that Disney makes to Latin American children in terms to produce some cultural proximity, maybe in terms of different dubbing strategies in different countries? And then I have a question about audience reception, but maybe we can start with that.
Great question. Thank you. I would argue that Disney is far more familiar and able to target and to market to Latin America than they are to the US Latino market. They have not figured out what a US Latino is, and to this day, because neither Coco nor Elena are Latinos. They're Latin American, and they market them as Latinos, but they're not. So they're still drawing. So Coco draws stereotypical Mexico. Supposedly Santa Cecilia in 2017 has no cars, has cobbled roads. There's no technology other than in the magical world of crossing over to the land of the dead. And you know, when you go into Coco, into all of the material, it says it represents Santa Cecilia, a Mexican village in 2017. There's no such thing in 2017, you know, so they're targeting that Mexican. And in fact, to this day, Coco remains the highest selling movie ever shown in Mexico. Okay, so it was very wildly popular. When they target Latin America, again, Disney is quite good at it. So for example, when they were doing the High School musicals, right? Because they had a lot of High School Musical paratexts that they launched throughout the world, India, Latin America. They had specific ones for Argentina and for Mexico that were very, very much drawing not just on Argentinian Spanish, which everybody knows is a different Spanish, and Mexican Spanish, which is also its own Spanish, but they were also drawing on local talent, right? So they were using local stars, singers that Argentinos and Mexicanos would recognize in their paratext of High School Musical. So they're very much attuned. When they do Disney in Brazil, they again incorporate the local situation, local talent. And by local talent, I mean on the air, because Disney by and large likes to use their central kind of producers to go into those spaces and then kind of use consultants on the ground to hire the local talent. So they are able to do that throughout the Americas. And again, I will repeat, they're much more able to do that and do it well because they've been doing it since the 40s than to figure out what is a US Latino. Because Elena and Miguelito are not US Latinos, but when they talk, they say, this is what we're doing. We have the first US Latina princess. Elena's not Latina. Elena's a hot mess of Latin Americanidad, but she's not Latina. Okay, your audience question.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, so we have two great questions from the audience already. One says, do you think the fact that Lelaine Vergara Paras, who plays Miranda Sanchez, is actually Filipino-American, is a way of repurposing the character to appeal to other audiences beyond Latinos?
Totally. I mean, Disney does this. I think that Vanessa Hudgens also has some Filipino in her. And in fact, you know, I've had several students say they love Gabriella Montez and Vanessa Hudgens because she has Filipino in it. So they feel identified. So what Disney's doing is they're kind of throwing in all of these little elements. And that's why both Selena and Demi, by the way, are partly Italian, right? And they do like that subtle Asianness, that subtle Latinidad, that subtle Mediterraneanness, And then that does actually appeal to a broader range of audience. And they do this on purpose, this ambiguity through these subtle inclusivities. And of course, most people, when they look at Lalaine, they don't know, they don't see any of that. I mean, they just see, you know, Miranda. I know little people called Miranda who are totally white. And so they don't see that. So these are all registering in these kind of like gaydar kind of things, like Latina dar, Filipina dar, and you're looking for it because the burden of underrepresentation, the kind of thirst for recognition is so huge that you are grabbing onto these as your lifelines of presence and visibility.
Excellent, thank you.
I can read another question from the audience. Someone asks, can you talk more about the whiteness and brownness of Disney's Latinx and Latin American depictions? How does this impact the ways audiences read what it means to be Latino? Do you foresee Disney including Black Latinx or indigenous characters? Thank you for the question.
Okay. So I'll start by saying something that I often say. If you're looking for the revolution, then probably you shouldn't be looking at Disney. Okay, because Disney will do things very subtly, incrementally. You have to look between the cracks. But if you want to like look for the Che Guevara, don't go to Disney for that. Okay, so that's one thing that I'm saying. And but yes, Disney represents a very light, nearly white Latinidad, and that's what they prefer, right? That's what they prefer to do. We also have research that most popular culture it has a hard time with Afro-Latinas and indigenous Latinas, right? And so, because that's an intersectional identity that a popular culture that draws on binary systems of meaning finds challenging. It shouldn't be too impossible, but it's like, what are we gonna do with Yalitza Aparicio, who's an indigenous, you know, Mexican actress playing in Roma, right? And it's like, what, you know? And so then when Vogue covers her, they do the weirdest cover of Vogue, even though Vogue covers are pretty weird to be, you know, to begin with, because they're dealing with this kind of a little bit dark, indigenous main character in an Oscar-winning movie. So this is a challenge to them. What we know from Mari Beltran, for example, is that when popular culture represents Afro-Latinas, they tend to get less the beautiful kind of protagonist roles and more the embodied kind of matcha roles. So they're more embodied, they're more active. So if you think of somebody like Michelle Rodriguez, right? And then we also know, and this is happening as we breathe, that there is a bit of racism within Latinidad, and there is a bit of kind of like, why are Afro-Latinas getting to play African-Americans when there are so few roles for African-Americans? So when somebody like Zoe Saldana, for example, plays Nina Simone, you know, African-American people say, hey, this is an African-American role. We'd like to get our chance to play this role rather than you choosing an Afro-Latina in blackface, because, you know, Zoe Saldana had to do blackface. So I don't think that Disney will never do it, but this will be a very subtle and slow and incremental process for Disney. And when they do indigenous, they still rely on very, very, you know, kind of traditional tropes. And even when they do Afrofuturism, if you're looking at the Black Panther 2018, the Black Panther is Afrofuturist, but it's like the usual tropes of Africa. Because other than Wakanda, you still get the jungle, the savannah, the tribes. The tribes are there even in Wakanda. Even as Wakanda is hyper technologized, it is still tribalistic, you know, so that's still there.
Thank you so much. I have one question. That we are almost at time, but I mean, a couple of weeks ago, Jessica Retis talked about bilingual journalism. You're talking about entertainment. In both cases, I mean, she zeroed in some of the same issues regarding Latinidad in the US, and therefore the difficulties that, you know, many of the bigger brand names in journalism have had in appealing to the Latinx market in the US. For instance, the New York Times pulling out right? Not being able to maintain its New York Times en Español. And you are now discussing how Disney has had an easier time, perhaps, getting market success in Latin America, in different countries, than in the US when it comes to issues regarding Latinx representation, the Latinx population. Do you think the inherent, nature of differences in Latinidad in the US make it more complicated to achieve commercial success that you, in comparison, say, to national cultures in Latin America or even in the Iberian Peninsula, which is something you alluded to at the beginning, but we didn't go into in depth. Do you think that's one factor whereby it's easier to achieve market success outside of the US than inside of the US in some of these both fact and fiction properties?
That's interesting because I mean every country that they flatten difference, right? So even whether they're going to Chile or to Argentina, I think that the Three Caballeros stopped by Paraguay or Uruguay, which was like the only appearance of that country ever in the Disney universe, right? And so they flatten difference when they do every country. They just haven't, I don't know if they don't want to or they haven't figured out that US Latinidad is its own thing. And I think that whenever they try to do US Latinidad, they do flatten difference. So for example, Dia de los Muertos, Quinceañera and Navidad, those are tropes within US Latinidad, right? And so they're going to flatten difference. I don't, maybe they'll have an occasional vehicle that'll be more specific, but that's not what they're aiming for. They're aiming for broad recognition. And that's what I keep saying. If you want some more kind of specific kind of representations that speak to the cultural specificity and class and intersectionality, Disney might not be where you want to be looking for things, because Disney that's not necessarily what they specialize in. It's just been really, really hard for them to do this US Latino thing. And I think maybe they don't just see enough profit to be gained from that, because as you probably know, Pablo, is, for Latin Americans, coming to Disney theme parks is a rite of passage for the middle class, right? You're not a proper middle class subject in Latin America if you have not gone to a Disney theme park sometime, and 40% of Disney theme park in Florida and in California are Latin Americans who are living out that rite of passage, and so Disney has marketed to Latin America very heavily. I mean, I grew up in Latin America. I don't know if you did, but in Chile, I remember so many Disney things that I did, and how my dream was, to go to a Disney theme park. And when I finally did, I couldn't sleep for 2 nights before the trip, right? It was just so amazing. And so there's that longer history, and maybe there's a longer profit potential, because maybe they're thinking the US Latino market, it's big, but they've been watching all along. So what is it going to get us? What's the bang for our buck to invest more in that? What the cost benefit analysis? And that's proprietary knowledge, as you know, so I don't know if anybody will answer that question in Disney for me.
Thank you very much. It's a great way of wrapping up a most enlightening seminar. Thank you, Celeste Wagner, for great introduction and moderation. Thank you, Angharad Valdivia, for a spectacular seminar. Thank you, the audience, for joining us. I invite you to tune in again in a week with Rachel Mourao from Michigan State University. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your days and your weeks. Bye now. Hasta la próxima.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.